So box, 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 box.
Hi, my name is Rochelle, and you're watching or listening to BoxBox F1 Pod. Welcome to the Spanish Grand Prix episode. Very excited to discuss. So it was actually a very good race. However, unfortunately, the very good race was quite overshadowed by the final 6 laps, which actually might be what the bulk of our analysis is focused on. However, you may have also noticed that there was no Monaco Grand Prix episode. I did record it. I cooked pasta with zucchini al naranjo, is that what it's called? It was delicious. Found out later it wasn't that traditional to Monaco, but you know, whatever. It's close enough to Italy. They definitely eat it there. But anyways, I didn't have enough time to edit it before this weekend began, so I've compiled all of the important things from the digital warm-up last time into this digital warm-up, and I've also included a really brief overview of what happened in Monaco, just a couple of minutes right from the very top. While we chat, I will be making a not very traditional Spanish dish. It's Spanish tacos that I got from Wishbone Kitchen. I don't eat pork, and the recipe obviously calls for jamon. I have turkey bacon, which is not as thin or necessarily has the same level of flavor that jamon would have, but hopefully it will be able to emulate it close enough. I also have manchego and Spanish olives. And I have very thin potato chips, not the posh Spanish ones that I was hoping to get, but they were out. I also usually have this like duck cured meat that's like super thin and more similar to jamon, but they were out. So making do with what I have. And to drink, we will be making something called Agua de Valencia, which is a cocktail from Valencia that calls for sparkling wine, vodka, gin, and orange juice from Valencia oranges, freshly squeezed. I do not have Valencia oranges, but I do have freshly squeezed orange juice. So the vibe will be similar. It'll just be less like Espanol. So I will be making that, and then we'll be prepping the Spanish nachos, which I'm very excited for. But before we get into all of that, let's kick things off with the digital warm-up. Lap 1. Monaco Grand Prix. So it sucked. In summary, it was not great. Basically, the cars are way too big to race around that track, and any overtaking that used to be possible when the cars were slimmer are just like impossible to do with the cars that exist today. It was funny this week when we were in Spain. Fernando was asked what could be done about Monaco, and he was like, the car should be only made to fit me and Yuki, and people like George can just figure it out. Obviously, the cars are too big width-wise, hence the lack of overtaking, but it was still funny what he said. Okay, so as usual though, Monaco was about qualifying. That was basically the most fun day because it's the only time they can just go like full send through the Monaco streets. And Monaco's always great on qualifying, and that hasn't changed this year. However, they really tried to spice things up by implementing a new rule change that was supposed to make things interesting, and basically they required a minimum of 2 stops during the race. Okay, Agua de Valencia. I don't know if that is it agua? Like, okay, Agua de Valencia. Cheers. Salud. Wow, people must get fucked up on that. All right. So they implemented a minimum of 2 stops, whereas before, like any other race, it was just 1 stop. The rule is added because at last year's race, we had a red flag on lap 1 and basically drove around for 78 laps with the like starting grid that to the finish. Of course, last year we had Charles's historic win where he won in Monaco, and it was glorious and not tragic. It was super happy. There was lots of tears, but I think that incredible moment overshadowed the fact that it was actually a pretty fucking terrible race. So anyway, this year they were hoping with this new rule there would be more chaos, and anyway, that hope was like dumb and stupid because like it wasn't better. It was actually probably worse. But not only did we basically finish how we started, we also got to experience some of like the worst strategy possible. Like I think it's some of the worst strategy calls I've ever seen, but like, I don't know, the teams kept saying they didn't have a choice. We wanted interesting strategy. We got different strategy, but like it wasn't good. Basically what happened is that everyone played the team game, and I know, wow, teammates working together, crazy, but like for real. Credit where credit's due. This was Racing Bull's idea. Probably their first and last genius strategy call ever. Basically, Liam held up the entire grid from where he was at so that Isaac could get both of his pit stops out of the way. And then Isaac did the same thing for Liam. And it worked for them. Liam scored his first points of the season. 10 out of 10 work. And then Williams was like, oh, man, we hate racing like this, but they've left us no choice. We shall do the same. I'll talk a little bit more about Williams in a second, but just like to recap very quickly from the beginning, it's going to be a very quick recap. There were 2 virtual safety cars throughout the race. Pierre and Yuki had a moment in the beginning that caused Pierre to DNF. Fernando also DNF'd, which was really shitty for him and his claim that he was the most unlucky driver on the grid, because kind of seems like he's right. But like, let's talk about Williams' strategy, which, like, as I've said, was basically copying Racing Bull strategy and to just go slowly until both team members had time to pit. And this caused havoc for everyone. Everyone was so annoyed. Apparently, James Vowles texted Toto apologizing, being like, "We have no choice." And Toto was like, "Okay." Like, he's like, "I get it, but like, also, this is so annoying." Because it really fucked over Mercedes. Mercedes had a terrible week last week. And I'm just like confused why Williams keeps saying they had no choice, and this is not like how they like to go racing, but like did it anyways. Like, either own it. I just don't understand why they kept saying this is not what they enjoy doing, but they had no choice. It worked for them, so just own it. And like, honestly, yes, both Racing Bulls and Williams ended up in the double points for their team, which is a first for a couple of them. One of them. But like, was it worth it to ruin a good time for everyone else? Just kidding. There was never going to be a good time for everyone else. After the race was done, the drivers were basically like crashing out and giving the most ridiculous ideas for improving the Monaco Grand Prix next year. Max was like, well, it's basically Mario Kart, so we might as well just give everyone banana peels and have them chuck them around. And then I think Lewis was like, why don't we just drive our Lego carts? And then George was like, I have a great idea. Let's set up sprinklers all around the track, and then each driver gets a button that they're allowed to press twice throughout the race, and no one ever knows when the sprinklers are going to be turned on. But like, there's going to be some, like, everything's going to get wet. It's going to be chaos, and then no one knows what's happening. Basically, no one likes Monaco, but I don't think Monaco is going anywhere because it is just very integral to the spirit and the core of what F1 is and its history, and it's not going anywhere. I don't think they can fix it without making the car smaller. But the highlight for me personally from the Monaco Grand Prix was George and Alex. So basically, the Williams strategy that Alex was implementing when he was driving like super slow so that Carlos could pit was really pissing George off. Basically, George is like, Alex is pressing down on the brakes in an erratic fashion, and he's so pissy that he basically just cuts a corner to overtake Alex. And his team tells him to give Alex the spot back, and George says, no, I'd rather take the penalty because he's being like stupid, basically. And then he does get an insane penalty. He gets a drive-through penalty, basically meaning he has to drive through the pit lane without stopping, which is equivalent to like a 20-second penalty, because that's how long it takes to get through the pit lane. And the FIA does in fact cite his outburst about Alex deserving it and that he'd rather take the penalty. And I've seen a lot of discourse online about how the penalty is unfair. And I can't believe I'm about to take Stu's side, but like, it's fair. Like, George straight up said on the radio, I am doing this on purpose because I think he's racing stupidly, and then did it. So because it was a very intentional overtake off the track and cutting someone off, by his own admission, then he should be punished accordingly. And then Alex on the radio was also like, he's cutting corners, that's more dangerous. And they just sounded like siblings, bantering, like bickering, basically. Anyway, so after the race, George says that Alex owes him dinner for doing this to him. And he posted it on Instagram, the race, and he was like, yeah, Alex owes me dinner now. And Alex commented saying, I'll take you through a drive-through, referencing the drive-through penalty he got, which is hilarious. But then Alex posted a picture holding the receipt where he had taken George out to dinner. They're both in the pic, smiling. And then they were asked about it this week in Spain. And Alex was like, yeah, I took him out, but like, have you ever been out to dinner in Monaco during race weekend? Everything is more expensive. And George ordered the lobster pasta. I just got the carbonara. And then he pauses and goes, well, okay, it was the Wagyu carbonara. And George didn't get dessert. And I did. And then, but also we didn't go out. So we did save money, which made me laugh at Alex's like budgeting rant in the media pen. And George said in his press conference that the dinner wasn't expensive enough and that Alex has not yet paid his dues, which made me giggle. So Lando won the Monaco Grand Prix, which was very exciting for him. He basically just did an outstanding quali lap, and that just won him the race because nothing can happen in Monaco. And Charles was second and Oscar was third. It was a little heartbreaking to see Charles in second because he was super close to getting first. Max, in fact, I think was driving slower to try and slow Lando down so that Charles could catch up and overtake into first. But alas, it didn't work. He got very close. And then after he was asked if he's going to the Prince's Ball, he's like, yeah, I've been told that I have to go because the winner always attends the Prince's Ball in their honor. And he's like, yeah, I've been told I have to go. I need to get a tux. And the interviewer was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I don't have a tux. I need to get a tux. And then we saw a video of him at the party entering with the prince wearing a tux. So either he lied or if there's any place in the world that I feel like you could get a tux on demand on a Sunday just like that, it's probably Monaco. And then later he was seen partying at a club, sans tux, still in a dress shirt, with Mbappe, the footballer from France. Mbappe loves F1, but he hates talking to anyone. So everyone, I know Brendel always tries to interview him on the track, and he just like always basically refuses. Also, I think he began his career in Monaco, playing for Monaco, so maybe he has like a special place in his heart for the Monaco Grand Prix. So anyway, that's it on the Monaco Grand Prix. That was quite a recap. The most important thing is that Alex took George out for lobster pasta. Cue that song. He be feeding me pasta and lobster. Anyway, lap 2, off-track F1. So where in the world are F1 drivers? So basically during the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, if you remember, Toto Wolff was not there. There was a really funny video of him giving a pep talk to Kimi and George, but basically just to Kimi. And George was like, well, what about me? And he was like, you're 27, sir. Like, you're fine, which was really funny. But he was actually at his son's graduation. I think I mentioned at that time. And I was like, I don't know which graduation he was at because what is Jack Wolff graduating from? It wasn't Jack Wolff's graduation. It was his elder son's graduation from his previous marriage. He graduated from USC. So Toto flew all across the world to see his son graduate from USC and was very cute and wholesome. Also, there was a lot of cons appearances. Pierre and Franco and Esteban were all there. Franco was obviously there because he's the other Alpine driver. And Pierre and Esteban are French. And they always attend con. In other news, the drivers ahead of the Monaco Grand Prix got a private screening of the F1 movie. F1 posted pictures of the drivers talking about the movie and captioned it, it's got the driver's seal of approval, which was clearly intentional because had they posted videos of the drivers talking about the movie, it would have been very clear that the drivers hated the movie. Like, I've heard them all talk about it, and it's like they're all like very intensely saying, yes, this is amazing, we love it, while like vigorously shaking their head no. Like they seem like they have to say they love it, but I think they all hated it. Side note, before I get into what they said about it, the style choices for this premiere was a little bizarre. It was just F1 drivers, their +1s, and like a little bit of personnel. I think a couple of journalists. But Lewis, Charles, and Fernando were all wearing normal people clothes. and the wags were all dressed beautifully, and then everyone else was wearing their team kits, and I don't understand why they were wearing their team kits to watch a movie. It was very strange. There was a lot of clips. There was a clip of Rebecca and Yuki were shaking hands as if they'd never met before. I feel like they should have. I don't know. Maybe they would have never crossed paths. She's like 8 feet taller than him. There was a clip of George being like, "Where's the popcorn?" And there was a cute group shot of all the drivers in the theater. The only 2 people that missed it were Max, who was actually gaming at the same time under the username Franz Herman 69, and also Lance, who just said he had other stuff going on. They were like, "So what was happening?" He's like, "I don't know, stuff." Max said that he likes to spend time with his family at home when he has off time, and this wasn't a mandatory event, which is fair enough, except he was gaming, so. Also, he got a cute pink steering wheel that was gifted to him in honor of Lily, his baby, and I think that's just so cute. He's racing with it all the time. Carlos said that he signed an NDA and he can't possibly say anything about the movie, and the journalist was like, "Really?" And he was like, "Yeah, no, I didn't sign an NDA. I can say stuff," and proceeded to like just unload everything he thought about the movie. And he was trying to be very polite. And he was like, "Well, I think it'll do really well. Just like maybe not for F1 freaks." Kimi posted, by the way, Kimi has a TikTok. I think it's like literally his, but like it's almost like it's run by a social media manager, because it's like these weird videos where he's like walking along and they're like, "Oh, hey Kimi, blah blah," and he's like, "Oh, what?" And then like gives his answers, and it just feels like, I kind of imagine a more chaotic, unedited content to be on his TikTok. But anyway, so he was asked about the movie and he was like, "Oh, it was great. It was very long. It was 2 hours. It's like an average runtime for a film." All the drivers basically said something along those lines like, "Oh, it's great for people who like," Charles was like, "It's a really good movie. It's very Hollywood though. Like, if you like for people who like really know F1, it might be a little frustrating. It might be a little bit like Drive to Survive." George was like, "I had a 3-second cameo, and sometimes it's like all you need." Apparently, Fred was really good in it, and I think that's like kind of the issue though, because like they're in this movie, they're in scenes, they're like, Fred's in the press conference playing himself. Like, I don't think he was given lines. I think it's just they're filming the actual press conference, and so it's probably a little weird. It almost does feel like Netflix is like, "Well, we're playing ourselves, but none of this actually happened, and this is not really accurate." But anyway, another thing pre-Monaco Grand Prix that happens is the drivers participate in a football match ahead of the Grand Prix, a charity football match in Monaco. Charles just watched, but Arthur participated. Daniel Kvyat was there. I don't know if that's why he was in the Williams garage the week before. That was weird. Carlos was there. Isaac was there. Ollie was there. Pierre was there. All of them played. It was very cute. Isaac was tired. They were like, "How was it?" He's like, "I'm tired. Like, my body is not meant for this activity." I've never played on a full pitch before. It was really funny. Speaking of Isaac and Pierre, PSG was in the Champions League final against Inter Milan. So PSG was in the final with Inter Milan, and they won. But Pierre and Isaac watched the Champions League final together in a hotel room, eating what looked like Chinese food and maybe sushi. And it was like a very bougie setup. Like, the hotel was wild. Isaac was wearing a very cute PSG sweatshirt. Pierre was wearing a jersey. The room was filled. It looked great. Someone was taking like really high quality photos of them watching this. Pierre had posted them. I'll link them in the show notes. But what I noticed, and like, it's not like I expected him to be there, but Esteban was not there. And it just like, Pierre invited, maybe he did invite Esteban, and Esteban didn't want to go because like he posted us on his story of him watching it, and it looked like he was like in the motorhome or something, and there wasn't like a crazy setup, and he seemed to be like not with a bunch of people. So maybe he was invited and just like didn't want to go. But it kind of felt like Isaac was invited, so Isaac and Pierre watched together, and Esteban just wasn't there. Esteban also seems a little less diehard than the other two. They were showing up in PSG kits the whole weekend, and Esteban was not. So maybe there's also that. Also, of course, Esteban and Pierre hate each other. I thought there was like a mutual respect thing going on, and like, I mean, Isaac could be like the bridge, because, you know, Like if you're inviting 2/3 of the French people on the grid, it feels kind of rude. But like, I'm assuming that Pierre didn't invite him. It's very likely that he did, and Esteban didn't want to go, or like didn't even expect to be invited. But it was cute to see them hanging out together, Pierre and Isaac, and they seem like a really fun duo. But anyway, lap 3 trackside in Barcelona. There's just like 2 moments that I really want to talk about that happened in Barcelona. Both of them were incredibly memeable, but basically Carlos walked out of the Williams motorhome and straight into an interview that was being filmed like right outside the door with James Vowles. And he walks out and he's very clearly in the shot, but he like panics and he immediately does the like, you know, where he like ducks but like straight, so like he like just bends his head backwards and like walks like he's doing the limbo as if that's gonna get him out of the shot. And it was also caught from so many angles, like people's cell phones, from the actual camera filming the interview, and it just looks so funny because he just like immediately folds into like limbo position and like walks across the entire interview, like the whole set. It was so funny. And the second memeable moment was Lando was walking back to the motorhome, and someone stopped him to talk to him, and Lando turned to keep talking to him and just rammed straight into the motorhome wall. It was so funny. And he just like everyone around him just like starts keeling over. And then someone opens the door and he just like sheepishly walks through the door. Just 2 incredibly memeable moments that just like, thank God we're caught on camera. Okay, lap 4 F1 news. So the rumors of Christian Horner going to Ferrari have been spreading over the last few weeks, and they have now been squashed by Christian Horner himself. He said that was ridiculous because his Italian is worse than Flavio's English. I believe this was said during the team principal's press conference where he was sitting next to Flavio, which is why he referenced that. He's not just shitting on Flavio's English behind his back. Interesting excuse. Maybe he has been approached. I don't know. There was also rumors that Zach called Max, started by Christian, and then Max was asked about it, and he said, my team was called by people on Zach's team. But the conversation ended really quickly once they found out how much I cost. Kind of, this seems like a theme. I think this is like the 3rd time we've heard about someone trying to call about Max, finding out the amount he costs. I don't know why they need to call to find out. Like, I can Google it and know that they probably can't afford it. I don't really know how Red Bull's affording it, but I guess their whole life is Max, and that's why they can't update the other car. In other news, Disney and F1 announced a collaboration, but all it said was Disney X F1 2026. And I have zero other information about what it could possibly be. Part of me thought it was maybe like the ESPN is no longer going to be broadcasting the races and someone else has to pick it up. I'm like, maybe Disney picked it up, but like ESPN is owned by Disney, so that's weird. Would it be a show, but we already have a show? Would it be a movie, but we already have a movie? Like, I don't know what it could be. In my head, I'm imagining like the Disney Channel games, if anyone remembers those, when like all the Disney Channel stars like competed in like camp games. But like instead of camp games, it's just F1 cars. I don't think that's it. And I also know zero F1. I know zero Disney Channel stars at the moment. So maybe not. Anyway, Lance Stroll has withdrawn from the Spanish Grand Prix. He did so after qualifying in order to get a procedure done on his wrist because he's been experiencing pain since his surgery in 2023. Or it's related to that. They didn't say like he's been in pain since 2023. I'm assuming he has been in pain since 2023. Because in case anyone forgot, my insane crash out at finding out that Lance was competing after having multiple broken bones in his wrist, needing extensive surgery and broken toes. And he was just like allowed to race like a week after that surgery. I thought that was psychotic. And what do you know? Things didn't heal well. Who would have thunk? So he's getting a procedure done. It kind of sounds like, this is all assumption, conjecture, obviously, but like it sounds like they did as many non-invasive things as they possibly could for his hand, and now they need to do a more invasive thing. However, I feel like I don't know what they could be doing. And it could also explain how, like, I thought he was disinterested before, but he's been like extra disinterested the last couple of years. And I think this would explain why, if he's been in pain the whole time. Maybe he hasn't been telling people. I don't really know what's been going on. All of this is me assuming stuff. But whatever it is, it must have been really bad for them to withdraw him after qualifying, considering how quickly he competed last time. And they did not replace him. And apparently there is pressure because their only reserve drivers will have other commitments if Lance is not back in like 2 weeks or whatever. I believe Felipe Drogovic is supposed to be competing in 24-hour Le Mans, and he said F1 is a bigger priority, which I think is a little odd. I feel like competing in 24-hour Le Mans where you have a chance of winning instead of driving the shitty Aston Martin. I don't know if it's worth it, but maybe he thinks it's like his way in. Who knows? Anyway. Wishing Lance a speedy recovery and an early retirement if that's what he wants. If that's what he wants. People being mean to him in the comments are just assholes because, like, I don't think he deserves for people to be mean to him. He definitely was average before. He got worse. He was doing okay this year, like just neutral. He was in the top 10 for the Drivers' Championship. Like, I don't know. I think people need to leave Lance alone. All right. Anyway, with that, we conclude the digital warm-up. On to analysis. I'm going to put the chips into the oven to warm them up. All right, do a really brief thing on quali. Yuki qualified last, which is a little crazy. I got several messages being like, what's wrong with Yuki? I don't think there's anything wrong with Yuki. They said they tried out a new setup on his car that obviously didn't work. Max was asked what happened with Yuki, and he defended him, saying that he's not a pancake and that these issues have been going on for a while. Trying to understand the pancake comment, because my first instinct when I hear a driver being compared or not compared to a pancake, it's because they've been flattened in a crash. I don't think that's what Max meant. I don't know if he's like saying that like people are treating him like food. I don't fucking know what it means. Maybe it's like a weird Dutch translation. I don't really know. But the gist of what he's trying to say is that this is not a Yuki issue. These issues have been going on for a while, which we all know. Like I told everyone that messaged me, Yuki is not the problem now that we've had 3 drivers in that car. And Daniel tested it as well. The issue is clearly not the driver. These are all incredibly talented drivers. The issue is the car. Anyway, so the starting grid is as follows. Oscar, Orlando, Max, George, Lewis, Kimi, Charles, Pierre, Isaac, Alonso, Alex, Gabriel, Liam, Stroll, qualified 14th. 15th, Ollie, Nico, Esteban, Carlos, Franco, and Yuki. Yuki had some changes in park firm conditions, so he starts in the pit lane. And Stroll dropped out due to injuries, so there are actually only 18 cars starting on the grid, and everyone below Stroll, so 15 through 19 just got moved the space up. All right, so the start. It was fascinating to watch Oscar learn in real time how to adjust during the formation lap. So they do the formation lap, and Nico Rosberg was doing the commentary, and he was like, by the way, this looks really chill, but it's actually super important because they're testing things and trying things to see how they'll do it once we start. And then we hear Oscar's radio being like, how was that like takeoff or whatever? And his engineer's like, well, you should probably do this and this and this. And then it's the real start. Let's go out, and the way they go, and Oscar implements everything his engineer told him. And it was just really cool to see. I'm sure a lot of them do that, and I've just never heard them given specific instructions, and then seeing Oscar's start improve so much. So he had a flawless start basically, and he just like basically took off. He took off and was just like off to the races, off racing. But behind him, Max almost immediately overtook Lando into second. And then behind that, poor Georgie was overtaken by both Ferraris at once. So it was a struggle for Lil George. After that, we had a pretty good race, honestly. And like had the final 6 laps not happened, we'd probably be talking about the different strategies that were implemented and the tire saving capabilities and yada, yada, yada. Could have done a whole episode on it. Unfortunately, the last 6 laps did in fact happen. So that is what we will be talking about. So basically after 50 laps of great racing, we get to our first safety car in lap 55. Kimi Antonelli ends up in the gravel, and it results in a safety car, which is apparently the first time in a long time in Spain. And they show Toto seeing Kimi in the gravel, and you can't hear him, but you see him say, fuck. And just like shake his head. And then they zoom into footballer Jude Bellingham as they're talking about this. And Crofty is saying, this has entirely changed the nature of this race. And Jude Bellingham can scarcely believe what's going on here. Not sure Jude Bellingham was that invested in what was going on, but it was really funny. And then Nico, honestly, bless him, but he was like, thank God that basically Kimi DNF'd because of engine failure, and that's why he pulled over into the gravel. And Nicky was like, thank God this is engine failure and not like a driver's mistake. He was like, it sounded like he was watching the replay with bated breath, like really stressed that this was going to be a driver's mistake, because he's like, this would really set Kimi back in terms of confidence and everything. He's not had a great few weeks, and like it would just be terrible if this was a driver's error. So thank God it's engine failure. And I just thought that was really cute. Like, everyone's just rooting for little Kimi. He spent this entire weekend wearing like really short Adidas shorts, Sambas, black Sambas, and like that metallic Mercedes windbreaker that him and George just keep like interchanging. And he looked so European. It was crazy. But anyway, everyone loves little Kimi. Everyone wants him to succeed. So during this safety car, Oscar, Lando, and Max are all in the pit lane. And Max gets hard tires put on. And everyone is like, what the fuck? Why would you put hard tires on here? There's been no evidence it works. It was just like a really weird move when he was on, I think he was on soft tires that were only 8 laps in. And yes, there was still time left, but we were going slowly. I guess I didn't know how long the safety car would be, but they switched them to hard tires that were new. That's all they had left, basically. Which, A, poor planning on their part. B, would it have been that bad to stay out on soft tires until the end of the race? It couldn't have ended worse than this did, but you know. So the tires got put on. Max clearly didn't know what tires are going to get put on him, because he goes on the radio and goes, what the fuck is this tire? And GP goes, now that is a hard tire, Max. And it really sounded like a nature documentary. It sounded like, now they are the penguins. And he's like, now that is a hard tire. And Max was like, why? Like, genuinely so perplexed. Not like, he wasn't even angry yet. He was just like so dumbfounded that they would put hard tires on him. He literally went, why? It was kind of funny. Didn't know we were like that was like the start of like a full-on crash out. Like, Max like fully crashed out, started spiraling. So when we restarted, we almost had like a full-blown pileup. Basically, we'll get back to Max's hard tires in a sec, but we basically had almost like a full pileup, because Oscar braked really aggressively to let the safety car go back into the pit lane. And I think no one was prepared for it. He like crunched down on the brakes. Everyone crunched down behind him. So he braked really hard, started going really slow. And Crofty was like, so if this were you, Nico, when approximately would you like start going again? And Nico was like, that's a great question. And then like pauses. And then as Oscar zooms ahead, he goes, about now. It's kind of funny. And so Oscar took off. It wasn't like the greatest start ever, but it was good enough. Honestly, I love Nico commentating. It's like so nice to hear someone who knows what they're talking about. You know, like, he's won a championship. He's raced against not everyone on the grid, but against a lot of them. He like knows people. He knows the game. He knows all of this. I did think it was really funny. I think he was asked if he can explain Lewis's performance recently. And he's like, well, it's this thing called age. It was kind of funny. But anyway, so I want everyone now to remember that Max was like taken by surprise by his tire choice, by his team's choice of tire for him. Please remember that. So our first Max-related incident was with Max and Charles. Basically, Max and Charles are head-to-head, and then Charles gets ahead. And Max immediately goes, Charles rammed into me on the straight. Charles rammed into me on the straight. And then they did a replay. Charles did not ram into him on the straight. He passed him, and then Max tried to overtake him again, and they touched. And Nico immediately goes, "That's ridiculous, Max. You touched him. Don't be stupid." And Nico is not a Max hater, I would just like to say, like some of the British commentators. He likes Max and he respects Max a lot. And he was like, "No, Max, you're tripping." Max was tripping. Max was like, I don't even know how to describe what was, I'm a big Max defender, and I was really struggling to understand what was going through his head during this time. Basically, Max made a mistake as Charles was trying to overtake him and walked up really aggressively, and it ended up causing contact. I don't know why Charles kept shouting that Leclerc hit him, but anyway, it was just a mistake. But so now Charles has overtaken him. It's being investigated, of course, as everything is. But at the moment, there's no consequence against Charles. So they continue on, and then it's Charles and George. So they had their first incident was basically George technically had the corner, but got caught up in like dirty air and swerved aggressively into Max. It looked kind of like Max kept driving straight, and so immediately people watching and his team were like, okay, well, you kept driving straight and he had the corner, so give him the spot back. And that caused Max to literally, if he wasn't crashing out before, he's crashing out now. He's like, why the hell? It was so annoying. I think he was swearing so much and there was so much bleeping that I couldn't actually hear what he was saying on the radio. He's like, why the hell would I give this spot back? It's my turn. It's not his. If this is where things had ended, it would have been fine. However, his team told him to give the spot back. Max didn't want to give the spot back, but the team was like, you have to give the spot back. Those are the rules. So Max slows down, seemingly to give George the spot back. And then I guess, I don't know if he changed his mind halfway or like what happened. But basically, he slowed down to let George pass. George started to pass, and Max was like, JK, and then started moving forward again, causing them to crash. And he didn't get to keep the spot. George ended up ahead anyway. I think, and this is a bit of a conjecture here, but I think Max was really pissed about many things that happened in a row. And when he was told to let George pass, that was the final straw, because I don't think he needed to let George pass. Max clearly didn't think he needed to let George pass. Only Red Bull seemed to think they needed to let George pass. Of course, at the time, we thought Red Bull was in communication with the Stews, and the Stews were like, he lets him pass or he gets a penalty. Find out later that's not the case. But anyway, so Max understandably is pissed about this. What is not okay is to deliberately try to make someone crash. What I think happened was that he was like, I'm going to make a statement. I'm going to like go to let him pass and like brake, but like it's not going to be illegal. I think he was intending to let him pass. I think. Again, conjecture. However, the hard tires caused him to not be able to do that. Like whatever it was with the hard tires that was problematic, that's what that caught him up, and it ended up causing them to touch. Because like the theory is that Max intentionally tried to crash into George, and I just don't think he did. I think what he did was wrong. But basically, after in the post-race interviews in the media pen, he kept being asked like about this, and he kept just saying like, "I have nothing to say. Does it matter? Like, let's talk about the rest of the race," and just like being like purposefully annoying. And I think everyone was like waiting with bated breath for Max to give like a reason for his behavior, and Max just could not. Because I think he had no explanation. I think he didn't intend for it to go the way it did, but Max does not want to back out. So he's just standing his ground instead of just admitting like, hey, I fucked up. Of course, adrenaline is still running high. I don't know, that's my thought. I'm a huge Max defender. I I just don't think he intentionally tried to crash into George. I think he intentionally tried to do a move, but I don't think he thought it was going to go necessarily the way it did. And that's why he's like deflecting in interviews, because like he doesn't actually have an explanation for what happened. It ended up being a little crazier than he intended, and he just has no explanation. And also, I think he does think he was wrongfully treated throughout the race, which he was. Like, there was absolutely no reason for his team to tell him to give the spot back to George. None at all. His team basically caused this entire thing. Like, they should know Max well enough to know that A, putting him on those tires was a mistake. Telling him to give the spot back to George Russell before the FIA required it was definitely a mistake. There is no way they thought he would react well to that at all. But they did it anyway, and here we are. So in my mind, I'm definitely blaming the team more than I am Max, but Max really should have better control of his emotions, especially at this stage of his career. And I don't know. He's a 4-time world champion. He's mature enough to not behave like this. But like, I understand the adrenaline running high. I think F1 TV called it like a red fog or something. Haze, lavender haze. But which I can see, but like, I still don't think even in his like most furious, he would intentionally crash into someone. I don't know. So, but what's interesting is the FIA's ruling. Oh, he got a 10-second penalty for this. And in the FIA's ruling for it, it says, the stewards reviewed positioning, marshalling system data, video timing, telemetry, and in-car video evidence. From the radio communications, it was clear that the driver of car 1 was asked by his team to give the position back to car 63 for what they perceived to be an earlier breach by car 1 for leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage. In fact, we had later determined that we would take no further action in relation to that incident. The driver of car 1 was clearly unhappy with his team's request to give the position back. At the approach to turn 5, car 1 significantly reduced its speed, thereby appearing to allow car 63 to overtake. However, after car 63 got ahead of car 1 at the entry of turn 5, car 1 suddenly accelerated and collided with car 63. The collision was undoubtedly caused by the actions of car 1. We therefore imposed a 10-second time penalty on car 1. Again, to me, it kind of sounds like Max was like, oh, I let him pass and he was going to overtake him back. Sort of like how when I tell my dog to sit and she doesn't want to sit, so she just like squats and waits until like she thinks I'm not paying attention anymore. What I think is also strange is that the document clearly acknowledges that Max did this intentionally. In which case I feel like they should have given him like a drive-through penalty like they gave to George last week, as opposed to the penalty for overtaking off track. I don't know. It was a little weird. The punishment was a little weird. Max's behavior was a little weird. It was all a little weird. But to me, it kind of sounds like Max was going to let George through and then immediately try to overtake him, but because of the hard tires, he ended up like something happened with his brakes or whatever. He stalled and crashed into George. However, suspiciously, there is no on-camera footage from Max's car, so we can't see his like head turn. We can't see what he was intending to do. So, and since he refuses to talk to the media, we don't know. But I would interpret his behavior as a little embarrassed. George, of course, did not disappoint. Everyone kept joking they can't wait to see what George says in the media pen. Because last time they beefed, it was rather dramatic. George said, it's a bit of a shame because Max is clearly one of the best drivers in the world, but maneuvers like that are just totally unnecessary and sort of lets him down. And it's a shame for all the young kids looking up, aspiring to be Formula One drivers. So as I said, I don't know what he was thinking. In the end, I'm not going to lose sleep over it because I ultimately benefited from those antics. Why does he always bring in the kids? My God. Chill out, George. Someone compared Max to like thinking, like getting confused and thinking he was iRacing, like on a video game. I don't know, but George really doesn't need to keep bringing up the children. Some key performances. Nico Hülkenberg basically got knocked out in Q1, so had all his tires, like fresh tires, at his disposal, and used them to his advantage. He literally worked his way through the grid and finished P5. Was going to be P6 because of Max's 10-second penalty. Was P5. Nico in a kick-sauber, and he overtook Lewis in a great move. Everyone's like, oh my God, Nico is overtaking Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari. It was rather funny. William Lawson was doing literally the most this entire race. He was overtaking quite aggressively the whole time and finished 11th. And then there's our little Spanish kings. Williams basically had a weekend to forget. Carlos qualified like 18th, and the race did not make things better. Alex had to have his front wing replaced twice. Or he replaced it once and it got damaged again. They were just going to DNF him, and then he got a 10-second penalty. Or he got a stop and go penalty, so he had to pay the penalty and keep going. Otherwise, the 10 seconds would have been applied to next week, or to Canada. So he paid a 10-second penalty, drove around with a damaged front wing, and then retired the car. They were like, it just like give up. It was really bad. And then Fernando finishing the points for the first time in his home race. First time this season, not first time in his home race. For the first time this season, he scored points, and it was at his home race. And that was very exciting. I was very happy for Will Fernando. There were 2 penalties dished out during this race. Ollie received a 10-second penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. Oh, Alex also did, but they didn't list it on the... I just said Alex got a penalty. It wasn't listed on the website. Ollie received a 10-second penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage, and Max received a 10-second penalty for causing a collision. Post-race, Oscar said more on the radio than I've ever heard him say. Terry Crews was doing the interviews with David Coulthard, and he was asked afterwards what it was like interviewing them, and he was like, damn, I was more excited than Oscar was. Except I think he kept calling Oscar Charles. I think he was a little confused. But his enthusiasm was there. He loves F1, a little confused on the details, but he loves it. I also loved when he was asked which team he's rooting for. He's like, I'm not going to say which one because I want to get invited to all the paddocks. Fair, Terry. Also, when Terry was asked what it was like, he was like, man, it got violent out there. A little more knowledge on the finer details, but like, he's great commentary to have. He's good. What's it called? Color commentary? Great to have. Oh God, that's not what I meant. You know what I mean. It's called color commentary, right? When people add like the fun, like comments in between. Anyway. In the cool down room, the funniest moment, they're watching all the highlights, and then they show Max's move on George. And Lando goes, I've done that before. And Oscar and who else was there? Oscar and Charles just go silent. And then Lando goes, in Mario Kart. I'll give it to Lando. It was funny. Today, I, along with many, many people, discovered that Oscar has not one sister named Hattie. He has 3 sisters, and another sister was there who looked so cool. She had like this piercing in her mouth that I've never seen before, and she just looked really cool. She looked like she was some like indie artist. I thought she was some celebrity. No, it was his sister. And then once I processed that it was his sister, they actually look identical. She looks exactly like him and Hattie and everything. Anyway, Oscar seems to be the most boring person in his family. And he's a multimillionaire Formula 1 driver. So that's saying a lot. And he signed a little champagne bottle to the sister. I think her name's Eddie. I think it's Hattie, Eddie, and something else. There's another one. Hattie's the most famous online, obviously. But he signed it to the sister, and she just looked so happy and proud. It was really nice. Also, I'm really loving the Australian anthem. I've heard it more than I've heard the Dutch anthem. I'm almost hearing it as much as I heard the Dutch anthem last year. I'm not mad about it. It's very jaunty. Like, it's fun. They've got like nothing to be stressed about or to prove. And I like that. The driver of the day was hilariously Max Verstappen, because I believe people voted before the last couple of laps occurred. It was not Max Verstappen. Oscar, 10 out of 10 race. Nico Hülkenberg, incredible race. So many options besides Max freaking Verstappen, who actually did have a fantastic race up until the last 6 laps. So actually, when people were voting, very warranted. By the time the votes were finalized, less warranted, but you know, good job, Max. Dick in the box, 100% from Red Bull. I would definitely say the pit wall. And then Max also deserves it, honestly, like, as all the excuses I can make up for him in the world, there's no excuse for crashing into someone. And then like, even though I'm sure it was I'm sure the level crashing into him was an accident, not the maneuver. It was, he just couldn't execute it given the hard tires. You apologize. You don't just stand by and be like, well, there's nothing really to say. There's something to say. Anyway, Max's 10-second penalty pushes everyone up for some incredibly best results of their season. Oscar in first, followed by Lando, Charles, George, Nico in fifth, Lewis in sixth, Isaac in seventh, Pierre in eighth, Alonso in ninth, Max in 10th, Liam in 11th, Gabriel in 12th, 13th Yuki, 14th Carlos, 15th Franco, 16th Esteban, 17th Ollie, and then Kimi and Alex DNF'd. And Lance wasn't there. The driver standings are as follows, and Max like really fucked up his chances in the driver's championship, and he was asked about it. He's like, well, given how bad the car is, there wasn't much of a chance anyway. Like, that's not true, Max. He's just in a corner, and he has nothing to do but like continuing to back himself, which is unfortunate. But the driver standings are as follows: Oscar with 186, Lando with 176. They are 30 points apart. Max with 137. He is now 40 points away from Lando, and they were much closer last week. George with 111, Charles with 94, Lewis with 71, Kimi with 48, Alex with 42. Isaac makes his first appearance in the top 10 with 21, Esteban with 20, followed by Nico with 16, Lance with 14, Carlos with 12, Pierre with 11, Yuki 10, Ollie 6, Liam 4, Alonso 2, Gabriel 0, Doohan 0, Colapinto 0. The standings are as follows: McLaren with 362, Ferrari with 165, Mercedes with 159, Red Bull with 144, Williams with 54, Racing Bulls with 28, Haas with 26, Kick Sauber with 16, Aston Martin with 16, and Alpine with 11. And that is the end of the Spanish Grand Prix. Here are my nachos. Well, every time I try to show them, can you see? Here's my agua de Valencia, and here's my nachos de Español. Next up is Canada. I don't know what to make besides poutine. Please, if anyone has ideas, hit me up. I don't really want to make poutine. It's basically this in a different format. Anyway, that's in a couple weeks' time. We have a bit of a break. In the meantime, make sure you follow, share with any potential boxes, and subscribe. Leave a review if you can. That'd be amazing. I would really appreciate it. And also follow on social media at BoxBoxF1Pod to keep up in between races. Until Canada, eh? Box.